Hey y'all, hey, it's JJ Conway. Welcome to Building Wealth Together, where our goal is to help you walk in abundance and leave a legacy. It's Mindset Monday, where we take the best teachings on mindset, motivation, and leadership and apply them to your life. This helps you get past the past and grow forward into abundance. What we're going to do today is we are going to talk about something that really impacted me deeply when I attended the Citizens Police Academy. Many of you know I am on the Shreveport Mayor's Commission for Race and Diversity. And while our commission doesn't work directly for the mayor or for the city of Shreveport, our task is to investigate and report and highlight and make suggestions for change regarding racial disparities in several areas in Shreveport, Louisiana, to include things like its education in schools, the disparities in healthcare, the disparities in police treatment, the disparities in the media portrayal of perpetrators of crimes or suspects, okay? We're exploring all those kinds of things, and we're not just looking for anecdotal evidence, but we are also looking for statistical, hard numbers, hard facts, okay? So we're looking for both, because you're really going to need both to tell the story. What we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about emotional survival for law enforcement. And this was a book that I received the day one of attending the Citizens Police Academy. Some of you will already have heard me talk about chapter 6 of this book, because that was the chapter that really stood out to me the day that I received the book. Like, I couldn't put the book down. And I did a test class just to see how many of you would respond to it or resonate with the content. And apparently, even though very few of us on my page are law enforcement, I do have some law enforcement on my page, and I love them dearly. They're good people, and that's how I'm able to combat the image that the media wants to portray right now. You know, I do believe we have a racial disparity in how law enforcement treats people of color. I especially think, and this is something that hasn't been highlighted in our culture as of yet, but I especially think that there's a racial disparity in how crimes against Black women are handled by law enforcement. It's the same as healthcare for Black women. You know, Black women are a category that aren't taken very seriously statistically. This isn't just me anecdotal telling stories as a woman of color, but statistically, the research has shown that African American and other women of color, so, you know, Hispanic, Latina, other women of color have a more difficult time having doctors take them seriously, have a more difficult time having the police investigate crimes that are committed against them, have a more difficult time being taken seriously in general by the population, okay? And so we're not going to, I'm not going to say that the stuff doesn't exist. I've lived it. I lived it. I just talked with another female scientist a few minutes ago who lived that life herself. And she's like, we have to do something to encourage brown and Black people, women who want to pursue a career in STEM. I'm like, yes, sister, I'm with you. That's what we needed. And so she asked me about what would I have needed when I started my career. So we're not going to pretend that stuff doesn't exist. Okay. And if you're on my page and if you follow me and you follow my body of work, then we're not going to ignore that. However, we're also not going to succumb to the portrayal in the media of all law enforcement as demonized, out for blood. I don't even know what words to use, but you know what I'm talking about, okay? Because most of the people that I know in law enforcement, and when I say most of the people I know, the only reason I'm not saying all of the people I know is because I've been pulled over for no reason. And I've been harassed for no reason. Okay. And so tangentially, I know some of these people, but I don't know them. They're not friends on my friends list. Right. And so, but the people that I've broken bread with who are law enforcement, good people who want to make a difference, who want to serve their community, who want to do good things, who want to help. I'll never forget that Shreveport cop begging the young Black teenager, don't make me take you downtown, pleading with the young man not to be taken downtown so he wouldn't have to get a record and so it wouldn't have to stay with him the rest of his life. And the boy was like, well, I've done nothing wrong, so it doesn't matter. And that's what I was thinking. That's honestly what I was thinking as an innocent bystander trying to get to my car. I was thinking, Well, what difference does it make? If he hasn't done anything wrong, it's not going to matter. Well, I didn't know back then. It does matter. You go downtown, even if there's nothing you did wrong, you still get a record. And the next time you're around somebody who's getting in trouble, you may still have done nothing wrong, but you now have a record. And I want everybody who's ever said something like, well, so-and-so had a record, so, they were probably going to commit a crime, or they were about to commit a crime, or they're going to commit a crime tomorrow. So, what the police did is no big deal. If you've ever said or thought that, I want you to think about what I just said. This Shreveport policeman was trying to keep this teenager from ruining his life. So don't tell me all cops are bad, but please don't also tell me that we don't have a problem. And so when I saw this book, it was given to us by one of the trainers of the Citizens Police Academy. She was outstanding. She's actually, I forget the new name. I think it's crisis response, but she's basically like a hostage negotiator. And she just has one of these personalities. Like, you just want to tell her everything. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm so glad that I live a righteous life, right? Like, I don't have a whole lot of skeletons in my closet, right? Because if I had any skeletons in my closet, I probably was too lacking in discernment in my college years to stop from telling everybody everything anyway. That's one of the things the Lord's given me. But she gave us this book. She said, people don't realize the mental strain of being a police officer. And so I began to read through this book. And what I realized as I began to read through this book is that this is the same level of mental strain that you see in the military. It's the same level of mental strain that I've seen people who are other types of first responders. So, like fire. And we have a lot of contract. I don't know about other cities, but in Shreveport, we have a lot of contract EMS, right? And it's the same thing. It's the same symptoms that show the same problems. And so I did that test lesson that one day because it really shook me. And I realized so many people resonated with it. What I'm going to do starting today is I'm actually going to take you back through chapter 1. And then for the next couple of Mondays, the next couple of Mindset Mondays, we are going to dig into this book chapter by chapter. It is called Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement, a guide for officers and their families. And it's written by Dr. Kevin Gilmartin, who was also law enforcement, okay? And I love the quote on here. If you want to make it through to retirement, wear your vest, wait for your backup, and read Gilmartin's book. And what I didn't know when I first was handed this book is that I was going to resonate so strongly with what was in here, because in the military, we are overworked and underpaid, and we all have a high dedication to the mission, and we're going to make sure that the mission gets done no matter what. And I think it's not just law enforcement, first responders, military. I think it's everybody right now. I think it's the mom juggling 2 or 3 kids and all these different commitments and trying to figure out how she's going to make ends meet. I think it's the dad who's working 2 or 3 jobs trying to provide for his family, and nothing is ever good enough. I think we're all living in right now. I mean, I understand that COVID has alleviated some of this stress for some people, but for most of the people in my circle, their lives have ramped up since COVID started, not drawn down. Okay. And so if you're in the category where your life has become much less stressful, kudos to you. I hope you take advantage of the time. But if you're like me in a situation where your life is ramped up, your workload is ramped up since COVID, your family concerns that you have to address, and the amount of anxiety and fears amongst the part of your children and other family members that you have had to calm down and kind of transfer some of their anxiety to you. If you're in that situation today, you need this book, because a lot of us are barely living. I mean, we're alive. Don't get me wrong. We're alive, but we're not living. We're alive, but we are just going through the motions. We're alive. We're breathing. We are functioning. We have blood flowing through our veins. We have food coming in our mouth. We are technically alive, but we are not living. And for some of us, we might consider ourselves surviving, but many of us are declining. And we're declining because we are emotionally overloaded. We are stressed out to the max, and we don't know what to do about it. Too many of us don't even realize that we are in these situations. last year, I went through some legal issues. It was really a sad thing for me, just learning what I learned going through all that and realizing that sometimes you can be right, but you can be wrong. One of the things that really surprised me was even after I found the phone records that showed I was telling the truth, and even after I explained my rationale. For those of you who don't know, I was accused of defrauding the government. That could have sent me to jail, right? One of the ways I was accused of defrauding the government was by setting false appointments on my calendar. And what I explained to them was I had a supervisor that would routinely take these meetings and drag them into lunch. And so like you'd have a 9 o'clock meeting and you wouldn't be done until like 1 or 2 o'clock. I remember one time when it actually went till 2 and my boss was like, well, let's take a 5-minute potty break and let's come back and talk about this. And his deputy, in a rare moment of contradicting the boss, because nobody around there ever did, but he was like, sir, we all want to go to lunch. And everybody was thinking it, but nobody wanted to say it, And so I would pad my appointments. And that was one of the things that they got me with was, well, you padded your appointments. You said your appointment started at 11:30 and it didn't start till 1. Well, no, but I needed time to eat and I needed time to prep for the appointment and I needed time to have slop in case my boss did what he almost always does, which is he would book something against one of my appointments and then spill over into it. And then the thing is, did I leave and miss all the good stuff, like when they cut my funding, or do I stay and be late to my appointments? So I started backing up my appointments, right? And well, the lawyers didn't like that. They dropped the charges, but they didn't like that. And I found, I had all the phone records and everything that showed I was in good faith, and I'm thankful for that. And I had all the email records that showed I was in good faith, and I'm thankful for that. But, that situation forced me to move into another job. And it was a job that had nothing to do with my career. And because it had nothing to do with my career, until COVID hit and we all had to pull double duty to make the mission happen because everybody else wasn't working. Because that job had nothing to do with my career, it kind of took the load off. I wasn't the expert in this career field. I had nothing to do with aviation all my life. I mean, I might help keep weapons safe and make sure the bunkers are appropriately designed and make sure the parts and things are going to work the way they're supposed to work and make sure that, if we've got any fuels and power plants. I mean, that's the kind of stuff I've been trained in, right? So I was never trained in the operational aviation employment side of it. And so I was like, okay, I guess I will do task management tool. I will manage the taskers and tell people when stuff is due. I mean, like, what else could I do, right? Well, when I got into that environment where I was no longer super stressed, trying to prove my worth, trying to prove that I was a valuable scientist despite the car accident, trying to prove that I belonged at the table, trying to prove that I was a good speaker, trainer, and coach. Like, once I let go of all that, because I was in a job that I was never, ever, ever going to catch up to the young people who'd been doing that job all their life. Once I let go of all that, that's when I realized how much stress I'd been under. And I didn't even realize it. And I suspect that many of you listening to this podcast are probably in the same situation. You didn't even realize how much stress you've been under all this time. And if you got the break from COVID, then you may have realized it as you got a COVID break. But if you're like me and your workload ramped up during COVID, you may still yet be in this situation of emotional overload and not even realize it. Okay. And so that's why I really want to go through this content. I want to start with the foreword. Okay. The foreword begins with this sentence. If you're a cop, you're going to love this book. It could change your life. It might even save your life, your career, your home life. If you're not a cop, you'll still love it because the ideas in this book could certainly apply to you too. Y'all, that's my point. The ideas in this book absolutely apply to most of us who are of the personality to listen to my podcast, all right? He says, maybe you're in a relationship with a cop or you have a highly demanding career that puts you on the biological roller coaster ride, a concept that stems from Dr. Gilmartin's brilliant insight into the cost of public safety work and other high-stress occupations, okay? And that's why I'm bringing this book to you today, because many of us work in high-stress occupations, or here's what a lot of us do. A lot of us make our occupations, make our relationships, make our home life, make our physical life way more high stress than they need to be. I'll give you an example from my own personal life. I make my body stress more than it needs to be every time I tell myself one last time I'm going to pull an all-nighter to get my doctoral work done. Really, I should take better care of my body, and I should have gone to bed on time, which would have required me to do my doctoral work instead of watching TV with my husband or playing games with the kids or talking on the phone with my girlfriend or any number of things that I do, surfing Facebook when I'm trying to procrastinate from doing my schoolwork, right? And every time I do that to myself, my body is hurting for it the next day. It takes me a couple days to recover. And the reality of the work is the work only took a couple hours. It didn't take days and days and weeks as I was fearing. It's almost always just a couple hours. And yet I still procrastinate and I hem and haw and I don't want to do it and I don't think I understand what the project is and I don't think I can give the instructor what they want, and I find all number of reasons to procrastinate and avoid because it all comes down to me not thinking I can do it, even though I keep getting straight A's, right? I've got one class that's a B, but the rest of them are A's. And, the cycle continues. I put that stress on my body. I choose to use my time the way that I choose to use my time. All of us have been gifted with the same amount of time, okay? And so some of our stress today is self-inflicted, and I think a really good place to start implementing these principles is to realistically consider how much of our life stress is self-induced. I hate to admit it, y'all, but I'm like the biggest thing that stresses myself out, okay? But some of us genuinely work in high stress, high demand career fields. We're the kind of personality that's called to something higher, and we're good at what we do. Not everybody can perform under pressure, okay? And so when they start off in chapter 1, they talk about the journey to law enforcement. They talk about the excitement of receiving the letter of acceptance into the academy. Talk about the positive emotions that carry you through the academy training, all the 500 and something hours, at least in Shreveport. It's like 500-600 hours that they have to go through. It talks about the elation of the new relationships you form, graduation, and then they talk about going into learning on the job, how the job is new and how the job is actually a lot of fun. But there's a transition that happens. The transition that happens is the idealistic rookie to cynical veteran. And I'm sure you've seen this in your career field, even if you're not a cop. Dr. Gilmartin says here, as a new officer's career continues, he or she can learn to rely almost exclusively on the support and friendship of other officers, a tendency that begins during the intense bonding at the academy. The officer doesn't make a conscious decision to abandon old friendships. It's just a matter of time before they seem to fade away. There's so many things to do and learn and so little time left for socializing with old friends. How many young moms or entrepreneurs experience this same thing? Again, often self-induced, but not always. As the first year of the career draws to close, many officers find themselves distant and alienated from social networks and friendships that existed prior to joining the force. As the years of police career continue to pass, officers can experience social isolation from everyone except other cops. I mean, stop and think about this for a second. What do you do when you work in a career field that other people don't understand? Even though work relationships can be supportive and available, sometimes this means that your personal relationships become strained and distant and dysfunctional. This is one of those things that everybody has to understand. Just like in the military, you start off enthusiastic, motivated, idealist. You are serving your country, you're serving your community. But over the years, that change comes where your idealism turns into cynicism. Your enthusiasm becomes pessimism. And you were easygoing and excited, and now you're angry and you're the negative old guy or gal on the team, right? And so this reflects that tendency of those of us in high stress jobs to really take on the job, the whole job, and nothing but the job. The problem with this is as the job takes on more and more the officer's time and becomes more than just a job, it actually can become the central and defining aspect of the officer's life. And we see this in the military as well. When I first put in my retirement, I was not looking forward to retiring. A lot of my identity was really wrapped up in being Lieutenant Colonel Conway. And I was one of those people that have always had a life outside of the Air Force. I have always been a community advocate, and I have always been active in self-growth and personal growth and financial growth and all of these other things. So it really caught me as a surprise how deeply connected my identity was to the uniform. And it's the same with law enforcement. In fact, a lot of people, by the time they get to the end of their careers, they're like, you know what? I wouldn't have done this. If I knew then what I knew now, I wouldn't become a cop. I'd go to some other line of work. Or if I can just make it to retirement, I'm out of here. It sets the law enforcement members that this book was written to, as well as those of us who are in high stress environments, it sets us up for a life of survival. We're not thriving. We're surviving. We're basically surviving. We're crawling along. We are barely a fraction, a shell of who we used to be. And that's not healthy. And so over the next couple of weeks, we're going to go through the rest of this book, and we are going to learn how to tell when you are approaching this threshold of switching from being who you are to being this ideal of the job, being your entire identity. Okay? We're going to look at what to do about it, and we're going to look at how to prevent it from creeping in the first place. All right, everybody, I'm JJ Conway. I want to thank you for listening. If you liked this content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and forward to at least 3 friends. Tell your friends about this series and encourage them to join me for next Mindset Monday as we jump into chapter 2 about survival. Street survival and officer safety training must be the number one training priority. However, it doesn't have to be the only training priority. And even if you're not law enforcement, that principle applies to your life. And we're going to dig into it next week. Thanks for listening. Y'all take care and be blessed. Love the podcast? Be sure to like, subscribe, and forward to 3 friends. You can ask a question or take a life-changing class at buildingwealthtogether.com. Now, go walk in abundance and leave a legacy.